In our last video, we talked about how climate helps to turn rock into soil. In this video, we're going to use C.L.O.R.P.T and talk about how the O in C.L.O.R.P.T, which stands for organisms, and the R, which stands for relief, otherwise known as topography, help to turn rocks into soil. Now, the P in C.L.O.R.P.T stands for parent material, and rocks happen to be one of the parent materials of soil. So luckily, that base is covered for us. And everything we've talked about so far and everything in this video takes time, which is the T in C.L.O.R.P.T. So we'll be able to cover how rocks turn into soil using C.L.O.R.P.T in this video. I hope you're going to enjoy today's lesson and stay tuned for more Soils with Sorrell. First, what is an organism? An organism can be a microscopic bacteria, a gopher, a dog, a tree, and even a human. In simple terms for this channel, we will define an organism as an individual living thing. For an organism breaking up a rock, you probably think of a human taking a hammer to a rock and smashing it into little bitty pieces. And that makes sense because for the most part, we're bigger and stronger than rocks, and we have tools to break them apart. But we can take this idea of an organism breaking down a rock and applying it to all types of organisms of different shapes and sizes. For example, humans can break down rocks through excavation, tilling, or physically smashing them into little pieces. But trees can break down rocks by using their roots, which grow into the cracks of rocks, in order to find moisture. Small burrowing animals can bring rocks to the surface of the soil, which exposes them to the elements like the sun, wind, and rain, which we talked about in our last video. Sometimes aquatic life, like piddock shells, can make holes into rocks for protection, which turns them from a smooth, solid rock into something that looks like Swiss cheese. There are even microscopic organisms, such as lichens and algae, which break down rocks with chemicals that they let out in order to get to the nutrients inside. And all of these can happen at the same time. While a farmer is plowing his field, a gopher can be bringing rocks up to the surface. And while organisms in the ocean are taking apart a rock bit by bit, you can have a tree that has roots growing into the rock. So hopefully from your knowledge from our last video and this video, you can combine everything that you now know to understand that when you have a large rock and it breaks down into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, those very small particles contain the nutrients and the basis for what makes up soil. So now we're going to talk about how relief, also known as topography, helps to turn rocks into soil. Some of you may know what topography is, and some of you may not. For the purposes of this channel, we will define topography as the changes in height of a piece of land. And you probably have experienced topography and not even realized it. Do you ride your bike or drive your car up and down hills? Have you ever been in a plane and noticed that there are some mountains way up here and some hills way down here? All of that is topography. You can apply topography to a small area like your backyard or your town, or to a bigger area like your state or country. And in all of these areas, big or small, there are rocks. But what makes topography? The simplest answer is parts of the earth, or the plates of the earth, moving and pressing up or rubbing up against one another, making parts higher and some parts lower. There is a lot more that goes into this entire definition and explanation of topography and rocks, but we're keeping it simple. So now we're going to do a really simple demonstration to help you to understand how topography can turn rocks into soil. So this is just a clump of soil that I made from some potting soil and added a little bit of water. But this is going to represent our rock. For this demonstration, you can imagine it to be any rock that you want. I also have a piece of wood. This is going to represent our topography. If we turn it this way or this way, we can imagine that it's a hill or a mountain. This bucket is going to help us to collect the soil, the rock, during the demonstration, but it's also going to represent the ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of wood and I'm going to put it into the bucket. And then I'm going to roll our rock down the wood. This is going to represent a rock literally rolling down a hill into the ground. And there is a lot more that goes into topography and how rocks turn into soil with topography than we're going to be talking about in this video or in this demonstration. But what I wanted to show you is the basic principle of how slope and hills and mountains and just topography can help to turn rock into soil. Okay, so we're going to take our rock and I'm going to put it right here. I think that's a decent slope. So as you can see right now, the rock is in one piece, but let's see what happens as it goes down this hill. So our rock broke up. It broke up into itty bitty pieces. And what did we learn from our last video? We learned that rock becoming smaller and smaller pieces is what becomes soil, right? Because you're starting to release the elements that everything else needs, and the smaller the particle of rock and the finer the grains, the better soil that you have. So this process here is what happens all over the earth all the time, but this takes a long time to happen. Any rock can just roll down a hill or roll down a mountain, and we know that that happens every day. But the process of the bigger rock going into smaller rock and then this rock breaking down can take thousands and sometimes millions of years, depending on if this rock was in a hot climate, a cold climate, and what type of rock it was. So this is one way that topography can help to turn rocks into soil. There are a lot of other ways, and I want to show you one other one. So we're going to try to reform our rock a little bit. And it may not exactly work. Okay, we sort of have our rock back. So there are plates that make up the earth, which shift and move and help to create the mountains and valleys that we all know. So these plates can move towards each other like this and eventually go up and help to create mountains. They can shift above, they can shift below, and that causes other things that we may talk about later in this series, such as earthquakes. So what happens to the rocks that are caught either on top or below or anywhere around these plates? Well, a couple things can happen. As the earth shifts, so do the rocks, and depending on the composition of the rock, that can break up the rock as well. So right now you can see that the rock, if this was an earthquake or if this was the plates moving, rock is not doing too much. But let's see what happens if one plate were to shift upwards on another plate. As you can see, our rock broke apart. So I hope that you understand that earth movements and the topography of the earth help to break up rock in various ways. And all of this takes time. This can take thousands of years. This can take sometimes millions of years. It depends on the type of rock. It depends on if this rock was going from maybe the Himalayas all the way down to the valleys below, or if this occurred underwater. There are several factors that go into this, but the basic concept here is that a rock moving with earth shifts or down in elevation due to topography can help to break up a rock and turn it into soil. So that concludes our demonstration part of this video. So this concludes our videos on how rocks turn into soil. In our next videos, we will be talking about how air, water, and organic matter turn into soil. Thank you for watching my channel. I hope to see you next time. And until then, save the soil.